I'm Eva Oh, and this is the Teakink podcast. I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I would like to spill the tea on my life. Thank you for listening.
Hello, Eva. How do you go about navigating social interactions as an out sex worker? It's not the most common profession out there, so people often don't know how to react and may not accept when you tell them what you do for work. I would love to hear your thoughts. All the love from a fellow sex worker.
Thank you for the love. First, kudos for being ready to share what you do with the civilians, because I understand that everything that you say, people are not ready to accept, but tough shit. It's like, accept is an interesting word. It's when you tell somebody that this is what you do for work and they are shocked. Is that what you mean by that they don't accept, that they're not responding in a way that acknowledges it? Is that what you mean? I have a whole episode called, I think it was in season 1, called Society is Ashamed at the Dinner Party. And from memory, because it was a few seasons ago now, it was about, when I first started telling people what I did for work. So I would recommend that you go and listen to that episode. And I'll probably touch on some similar points here. But essentially, how does one go about navigating these social interactions? So how I do it is that obviously I'm pretty damn out as a sex worker. Here's my face. Here's my voice on the internet. Podcast by dominatrix Eva Oh. But, so I'm pretty damn out. But even then, I tend to not just tell absolutely everybody. It's quite context driven for me. And I think we individually have to decide how much we want to have to deal with, essentially, because that is the nature of it, isn't it? It's about, unfortunately, bearing the burden of society's shortcomings when it comes to revealing what we do for work. So how I go about it is I kind of read the context. Am I, with law enforcement, am I with somebody's, like a friend's very conservative parents? Am I at a dinner party with a similar demographic to myself? It's fairly context dependent. And I guess maybe I can even take those specific examples. And I will add one more, as in like a casual exchange in a car or at a grocery store. How about that? Those are kind of the things that are coming to my mind. So first, you're potentially in a scenario where things might be compromising. I know you mentioned social interactions, but I'm just going to try to go the breadth of it here. My advice is to understand what the ramifications are and whether you want to go about navigating them and revealing things accordingly. And I guess that's the crux of any of these potential interactions, but the outcomes are going to look quite different. So maybe that's as much as I can say about that first one. But then what was the second one? The second was conservative, maybe family members of a friend or something like this, which is like not an immediate in your group social dynamic, but something that maybe somebody else needs to navigate later. It's like a secondary sort of social connection. And how I do that is I try to ask beforehand what that friend needs from that interaction. Because for me, it's more important that my friend is going to be able to navigate their lives in a way that's going to benefit them. And sometimes it's too difficult for them to have to explain that. And I don't take that personally. I think at some point I would have taken that more personally. But if it's such a secondary interaction like that, like a secondary connection, I'm probably never going to see the parents again, then I will just try to make it easier for the person who I do currently care about. And so, but if it was like maybe their partner or something more closely aligned that I would probably end up spending time with, me as somebody who cannot connect with people without them understanding the reality of my day-to-day, then I probably would need to ask more questions as to why this was the case, and if that made sense to me, potentially abide by it, but maybe not be able to hang out with the partner, because lying on an ongoing basis is not good for me. But that's, I guess, 2A and 2B. And then when it comes to social scenarios, similar demographics, or maybe like friends of my friends, and it has been established already within my friends group that it's a very free conversation. This might be different for you, but within my friends group, this is just my job, and the end of story ish. So then I would probably just quite straightforwardly say what I am doing for work, because it's a very common question. And for the most part, because there's already some layers of filtering in terms of quality of open-mindedness, there are usually either, great, I know somebody who does that, or, oh, what does that look like? Or there's more positive curiosity than not. But in the early days, when I didn't have friends who were okay with what I did, I came from a non-kink aware world prior to my dungeon work life. That is basically what encapsulates the episode in season 1 called Society is Ashamed. And I think these are the interactions that you are mentioning in your question. And it is shock, nervousness, people side-eyeing their partners at the table, people shutting down at best. And others saying, oh, like, are you abused? Like, are you okay? Like, you must hate men. Like, it's slightly to very worse. Yeah. And so I think that I'm not able to necessarily let those interactions slide. And now I have sort of answers, where when people say you must hate men, or I also really hate men. I'm like, well, actually, you spend a lot of time intricately understanding the vulnerabilities of all the people who are in front of you. And yes, a lot of them are often men. And so in these cases, non-judgment, or at least a curiosity on who they are, is helpful. And so I guess I just go into the reality of the work. And I have a vocabulary for that now. Maybe in the early days, I didn't have it, and I would just feel the discomfort of the tension of the social situation. But yeah, over time, you kind of learn how to disarm and bring people in. And I hate that this is the job of like trying to have a nice dinner with strangers. This shouldn't have to be my responsibility, you know? And I was just saying to my friend, Laura, who I interviewed on the last season, actually, that I kind of look forward to a day when I don't have to think as much about how somebody else is perceiving what I'm saying. Like, I wish I could just have a little bit more of like a free tongue. And I know that it probably comes across as that I'm quite forthcoming, and I think that I am, but I still hold back. You know, there's still some things that I know that if I'm having a shit day and I just want to blankly complain, that if I say it in the wrong crowd, it can really be detrimental. And I really hope that it gets to a point where that's not the case, where people are just like, oh yeah, shit day, you know, not shit choice of existence. Yeah, so understanding the context of where you are. If you're not happy having to have those conversations, unfortunately shifting away from the groups who are not yet ready to understand their own shortcomings and their own hang-ups that they're putting on you. Yeah, and then there's the fourth group. The fourth group is like casual sort of interactions. And again, you mostly asked about social exchanges. But I find that this one is quite something that I have to deal with all the time anyway. I mean, you're in cars, you're at the corner store or whatever, you know, and sometimes you're carrying strange things that are sticking out of the bag that not many other people have sticking out of a bag, or you're made up in a certain, or whatever. And like people are asking, people see you, they want to know about what you do. And yeah, it's about, again, reading what I think might be appropriate. Am I ever going to see this person again? Do I feel like I'm getting an open-mindedness sort of vibe here, and it could be an interesting conversation? Am I feeling like they are not wanting to hear that from me? And maybe it'll just shut down the conversation and I'll get a crappy rating. Or who knows, you know? So I guess in a major city, people are a little bit more primed and prepped to need to at least come across as more open-minded. But still, you need to take your safety, your security, your sanity into account. And I will usually, because I'm not very good at outright like lies or like making up something. Like, it would be great if I could just say that I did something totally different, but I wouldn't know how to do that because then I have like no backstory and it would just take too much energy for me. Maybe you know how to do that. Maybe that could be a fun game that you would do at dinner parties. But for me, it has to be at least somewhat adjacent. So I think that if I get the sense that people are not necessarily ready, or I don't really want to have this big conversation, because even if it's a positive, curious reaction, I don't know if I want to have a big conversation, I'll sort of say things that are adjacent, you know, like, oh, I'm developing 2 TV shows at the moment, or I'm about to finish my memoir, or, oh no, the memoir one is a terrible one because then they ask you what you do and what you've done, that it's a memoir. But but yeah, I kind of do like adjacent stories. And then if they're really digging, then that means they're really curious. And I'm like, all right, I've got like 5 minutes left from my car ride. I can just like drop it. Let's just drop it. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, you need to decide how much you want to put in energy-wise, what you want to get out of it, if you're ready to play these games of explaining or game entirely and making up what you want to do, like what you're doing. I think we got to think about the outcome that we would like and tailor accordingly. Yeah. And for me, it's kind of tiring. It can be kind of interesting, like as a mental exercise, but I've come to a point where like my family or where my friends are in the industry, if not aware, supportive, we're ready to chat about each other's days. Dating, everybody knows up front. That's kind of where it's at for me and my particular personality that is shit at making things up. So you're going to need to decide what it is for you, but those are some options. If I was going to make something up, what would I make up? What would be fun? I mean, all of it doesn't sound like fun because we need to think of a craft of backstory. But I've heard somebody say dolphin trainer once. That was very cute. That would be a cute job. Sort of, depending on how you think about captivity, right? Anyway, off topic. Really good question. And I would definitely recommend listening to Season 1, Society is Ashamed at the Dinner Party. And hopefully the title of this one will be much shorter. It's very ambitious with my titles in the first season. But thank you for the question and thank you for listening. And I'll speak to you next time.